All right, it's stimulus update time, and I thought, who better than the great reporter at the Washington Post, Jeff Stein, who's been following this perhaps more closely than just about anyone else. He's been watching the ups and downs of all of this on the stimulus roller coaster over the past number of months. And Jeff is joining us on the show to bring us the very latest on these crazy negotiations, if there are any negotiations at this hour. Jeff, great to have you here on the show.
Hey, thanks so much for having me on. Really appreciate it.
You bet. So Jeff's been doing some amazing reporting over at the Washington Post. I guess, the news at this hour, it seems, and you can update me here, is that it looks like the White House reached out to Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer yesterday for some negotiations. That fell flat. Where are we? Where do things stand this morning?
Oh, you're exactly right. We are basically at the point where things that were considered not news at all and things that honestly really aren't significant are being given sort of undue importance because there's so little in terms of the stimulus to write about. We did a story yesterday about how Mnuchin had called Pelosi and that the call went nowhere. Typically that's not a huge story, but there's really so little action on this front and so little signs of life from the stimulus package. My colleague Erica Warner was in the Capitol yesterday. She did what I thought was a very funny photo montage of people not doing anything, just sort of empty hallways, empty meeting rooms, empty buildings. Nobody is really working, and Congress has essentially gone on vacation. And it seems like many lawmakers, particularly Republican lawmakers, are convinced that there is not a huge critical demand, especially after Trump's executive actions over the weekend, to do anything more. But I continue to hear from people on unemployment who are really struggling and desperate for additional checks. We'll see if that pain filters up, see how widespread it is, and see if it spurs further talks. But right now, there's really nothing happening.
I put up this chart a little earlier in the show, but it was a Bloomberg chart that just shows how well the last stimulus package worked. And when you look at these numbers and you see how important this stimulus was to staving or, at least limiting the amount of people that slipped into poverty, we're already starting to see the effects of these unemployment benefits of drying up. What are Republicans saying? Are they literally on vacation at this point saying we don't really see the need for an additional stimulus package? Is that kind of the talk right now?
Well, both the president yesterday and his senior economic advisor, Larry Kudlow, I think Kudlow used the phrase, quote, self-sustaining recovery to describe where we are right now. You're right, a lot of economists look at what's happening right now, the mild bounce back in jobs and in economic growth, and say a large, if not most of that, is being driven by the unprecedented surge in federal spending approved by Congress in March. We had about $1.5 trillion in federal stimulus in the second quarter of this year. That number is going down to close to $200 billion for the third quarter. So that, I think, basically every economist I talk to says that has sustained and boosted the economy. But to their credit, Trump and Kudlow and his other Republicans are looking at falling jobless claims. They're still extremely elevated, but they're lower than they were at the start of this pandemic. And and the stock market really is sort of the key indicator in a lot of ways. They're saying that there's this huge debate over what does it mean that the stock market is doing well. And Democrats and other economists and many economists I talk to will say the stock market, it may have a lot of investors in it from across the country, but primarily it's a reflection of a small number of companies and the very wealthy, and its continued success is in large part a reflection of the unprecedented efforts by the Federal Reserve to buy junk bonds and other forms of corporate assets and equities. Now, other people will say that's not true. The stock market is what the administration will call, quote, a leading indicator, which means that people in the stock market are very smart. They have the best minds in the world. They can predict, the administration believes, ahead of time what's happening in the broader economy. And the fact that the stock market is doing well, they say, indicates that the broader economy will eventually catch up. That is the story that they're telling. Very interesting to see if that proves correct, or whether people really feel like the economy is getting better, or the stock market is disconnected, which I think a lot of people believe, from the everyday experiences of Americans across the country.
Right. It absolutely seems like it's a tale of two economies. I've been saying that here on the show for months now. You know, the Wall Street can be very, very happy. They're gonna win if we're in a down economy because the Fed will just prop them up, and they're going to win if we're in a good economy because they're doing great and profits are through the roof. We saw tech companies' earnings last week was ridiculous, record-setting profits even in a pandemic. People are still buying iPhones like crazy. So it feels like this tale of two economies right now. And the people that watch my show, I see it in the chat all morning, how people are saying, I'm being evicted right now. I've lost my job, or my hours are cut, so I'm not even privileged to be able to get additional money from some sort of unemployment benefit. I'm a frontline worker. On and on and on, the tales of misery go. So will they come to an agreement here? Will they come to the table? How? It seems like they're still so far apart. I can't at this hour imagine how far apart they still are, but are we going to see any kind of agreement? What's your sense of what you're hearing inside the halls of Washington?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I wish I had a better, clearer answer for you. I think a lot of the people I speak to think that we have to watch the stock market to see if the fall, if that stabilizes. And I think it's really important for people to remember, in March, when Congress approved this massive federal stimulus that's just now coming offline, we had, at that moment, a real tailspin in the stock market. The Dow Jones Industrial Average took its biggest dip in years. There were headlines about how the entire increase in the stock market under President Trump was erased in just a month or two. And at that moment, at that precise moment when the stock market was so low, Democrats and Republicans agreed on a 96-0 basis in the Senate to approve this $3 trillion stimulus package. We are in a very different moment right now, and the stock market is looking much better than it did at that dramatic moment. And so there's a lot of speculation on Wall Street. Is the stock market high right now because they've priced in an additional federal stimulus, because they are expecting that Congress is going to approve more stimulus, and then that is why we're seeing high stock prices? And then if it looks like that is not happening, do the stock prices begin to fall, which in turn would lead lawmakers to additional action? It's kind of this weird cycle, this feedback loop, where you kind of need the stock market to realize that no help is coming in order for stocks to fall, which then push lawmakers to act. But if the stock market continues to think in quotes, obviously there is no one stock market, but the stock market continues to price in an eventual stimulus, then maybe it remains elevated, but that therefore deprives lawmakers of the incentive, some would say, to then act and then boost the economy. So I think, if people are looking for, will Washington feel compelled to act, the question of the stock market is really paramount. I see, Trump administration officials are on the shows that are devoted to covering the stock market. Basically, every day, or at least several times a week, you see White House officials going on CNBC, going on Fox Business, places where the stock market is paramount, and discussing where they stand. And that, I think, is a reflection in part of how essential they see that for their economic message for 2020.
And it just seems so disjointed, and this could be the opportunity that Biden and Kamala Harris are looking for right now in all of this, which is, echoing this tale of two economies and how the majority of Americans right now are just being left in the dust. Give my audience some sense of hope here, Jeff. What are you going to be watching over the next few days to see if there's any kind of movement? Or are we stuck until the middle of September? Steny Hoyer said no floor votes until September 14th. Are we basically on vacation for the next 3 weeks? Or do you see some glimmer of hope somewhere?
I think if there's any expectation or hope that there will be more action, it's that when you really look under the hood of the 4 executive actions Trump signed over the weekend, there's really not that much meat there. There's not that much substance. There's a lot of talk from the president about how he's protecting renters from being evicted. And in reality, all his executive action on eviction does is advise federal agencies to consider when they may want to postpone eviction. So no concrete action there. On unemployment benefits, we are seeing a $300 per week increase compared to if nothing happened, but that's still a 50% cut from what people were receiving before. And it's going to take time for the states to implement that. It's going to be complicated to do this via executive action. And not only that, it's only going to last 5 weeks. The amount of money they've allocated from FEMA is about $50 billion. That is expected to go very quickly. And that's not only going to go quickly, but it's retroactively dated. So if it lasts 5 weeks, and the unemployment program expired August 1st, by the time this is up and running, it will probably just pay out up through August till early September. On the payroll tax deferment that the president signed, the idea here was to just say, we will defer your taxes, you can pay them back later. But most companies we talk to say, why am I going to not pay taxes when I could just be stuck with a double bill later? That doesn't make sense to a lot of them either. So on action after action, it seems like for a lot of these things, there's really not that much there that will make people's material conditions better. And if that's the case, and if that is something that the president feels and notices and his advisors take note of, they could really feel additional pressure to act. But right now, still, odds of a stimulus to me seem very dim.
Wow. Well, yeah, I'm feeling the same way. I wish I had better news on it, but you've been doing some amazing reporting on it. And, as my audience likes to say, hey, vote. We've only got a few weeks till early voting starts in a lot of states. And if they don't feel the immediacy to try to do something bigger, then that's why we vote. That's why we vote in November. So, Jeff, great to see you this morning. Thank you so much for joining us. Make sure you follow everything Jeff writes about. You can follow him on Twitter. He's excellent, and all of his reporting over at the Washington Post. Jeff, come back on real soon here. We'd love to have you on next week. Maybe we can get an update from you again if you'd be so kind.
Would love to be back. Thanks for the kind words. Really appreciate it.
You bet. Thanks so much, Jeff. Take care and have a great day.